Welcome to Jason's Journal. As part of our Grounded Summer Tour, I am in Pineville, Kentucky. I'm actually in Cumberland Gap, Tennessee right now, as I could not find a coffee shop anywhere near the Laurel Cove Festival that I'm covering. Wi-Fi is hard to come by out here, y'all, and it's a nice problem to have. If you're new to the Marinade, maybe you went to Laurel Cove and this came across your social media feed and you wanted to relive the weekend, welcome. Those of you who've been here for a while, thank you so much for always supporting this thing. I'll give those of you who are new a little context for the show real quick. The Marinade is a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. The bulk of our work looks like me, Jason Earle, sitting down with an artist and talking about process. We're also fortunate to cover live creative events like this one, and my goal is to bring you along for the ride. So without further delay, day one of Laurel Cove Festival in Pineville, Kentucky. Waking up with family nurtures something that has been dormant for me over the last several years. I could blame it on Trump, and that's a huge part of it for sure. But also, you form a life with someone which incurs costs in other relationships. And I'm realizing now that's part of what happened to me over the last 10 years. So staying with my uncle and aunt in Simpsonville, South Carolina, brought back some really fond memories of motorcycle rides in the mountains and playing ball in the backyard. It was a really nice way to kind of reset as I began this Grounded Summer Tour. I'm accomplishing my goal so far. And the road was clear leaving my uncle's house, clear and winding, although I had a bit of a deadline. It's tough to hurry with scenery like this, y'all. The mountains always call to me, and plus with so many cool spots in my path, I couldn't help but spend at least a little bit of time here and there. So I stopped for about an hour at Terra Nova Brewing in Asheville, North Carolina, one of my favorite cities in the world. Had a beer, caught up on some riding, checked in at home, and then headed down the road for what felt like a week to my body and mind. I usually ride my bike to work. I walk a lot in my neighborhood in Florida. I don't do a whole lot of long distance driving, but again, there's something about this scenery and the place that continues to keep me moving down the road without too much trouble. Kentucky's the place of my birth, and that of generations before me. And so a flood of emotions hit me as I crossed the state line. I haven't been here in forever. And this was anticipated, and I'm grateful for it. The road that I took on into the park wound up into this state park, and there are just unconventional moments starting to happen. Small signs saying Laurel Cove Festival and arrows indicating general directions, but I was sent 3 or 4 places before finally finding out where I could check in. Usually there's a big sign, there's a table set up, that kind of thing. Not the case right now at Laurel Cove. During this search, though, I'm kind of grateful again for that, the way that the universe has kind of given me whatever I needed. As I'm traveling through this winding road and waiting behind a band that's loading in, I spotted Drayton Farley, who I was due to sit down with at about that moment. And I see him, and he's shaking hands, he's taking pictures. He couldn't move 2 feet without someone asking to speak with him, and he happily obliged every single person. When the line dissipated and I finally find out where to check in, I walk up to Drayton, introduce myself, and he's incredibly gracious. He apologizes to me as if it's his fault that I'm late and can't figure out where to go. But we agreed, he wanted to catch John R. Miller. And I was relieved because I also wanted to see him. If you've never seen John R. Miller, he has this no-frills, straight-ahead live show that leaves the songs bare, and there are few who write quite like him. Don't miss him if he's anywhere near you, and he's worth traveling for. After the set, Drayton graciously offers to catch up in his car, which is just steps away. At this festival, it's not like there's this huge parking lot or a field that you're parked in. It's just folks are just kind of parked along the road all the way up. More about that in a second and sort of the vibe. But everything is steps away at this festival. I've never seen a setup quite like it. Everything's about 20 degrees cooler than most similar festivals. No one's in a hurry, no overbearing security, just good vibes. And at first I was almost frustrated as someone who likes organization and order, but once I surrendered, the bliss rapidly overcame my creeping discomfort with the setup and the hangar that I couldn't help shake. I hadn't stopped moving, except to do that work earlier and to check in at home. It'd been hours. So I usually like to be as comfortable as I possibly can be when I interview somebody, right? I want to be set up. I want to set myself up for success, as I would one of my students in my middle school English class. Thankfully, that doesn't seem to matter with Drayton Farley. He is about as open and kind and giving of an interview subject as one could dream of. His answers are thoughtful. His demeanor is so easy. We're sitting there in his car and folks are filing by, almost to a person doing double takes when they realize it's him. I would venture to say 20% of the people who are walking by the car are wearing Drayton Farley gear and then they're turning their heads to see that Drayton Farley's sitting right there in his car having a chat with me on mic. And then as soon as the podcast recording ended, he was like gently accosted by a handful of fans asking for autographs and pictures. And again, more than happy to oblige. Just a very talented songwriter who's also an incredibly easy guy to root for. Still hadn't figured out the logistics of this festival. It's my first time covering, and it was getting cold after that interview for my Florida blood at least. It was probably like 60-something degrees. So I go back to my car and change, and then kind of hustle over to catch the first part of Nat Myers' set. I first learned of Nat's music last summer when he was featured on NPR. When he took the stage, I realized he'd been the guy standing next to me during John R. Miller's set. And I didn't know it was him at the time, but I thought, as I'm looking at this guy, I dig that dude's style. He had this hat advertising legendary Kentucky Refreshment Ale 8 and this confident grin on his face. There's just something about his demeanor and the way he was dressed. Just seemed like effortlessly cool. Man, he took the stage like he'd been struck by lightning. Told us he was going to play some blues and then did the damn thing. Now, at that point, I'm starving. I feel like I'm going to pass out kind of starving. And I've learned now, in hindsight, today I'm going to be better prepared. When you come to Laurel Cove, make sure you've got food and beverage in tow. There are vendors, but you're better off having your own so you don't have to wait in line. It's easy to get back to your car to grab a drink, grab some food. Just makes a lot more sense to come better prepared than I was. So after what felt like eons, I got some chicken tenders and went to watch Wyatt Flores in his headlining set. The main takeaway from Wyatt's set is how genuinely grateful the guy seems. He's blown up lately, and he's just really genuinely graciously talked about watching Laurel Cove from the crowd not that long ago and marveled at the fact that he was headlining. He must have said thank you 10 times. I didn't keep count, but it was really sweet and a great performance, by the end of which I was completely beat. He capped it by playing unplugged with his band, sitting at the front of the stage, the crowd singing along. It was the first moment that I had a chance to sit down and enjoy the music. It was 11:58, which is a good 2 hours past the limit of my normal bedtime. So as much fun as I was having, I thought I got to retire for the night. And this band I'd never heard of, Buffalo Wabs and the Price Hill Hustle, were up next for the late night set. But I kept seeing those guys walking around, and I see them they get on stage, and there's like this charisma that I'd noticed about them walking around the grounds. That's one of the things about Laurel Cove. It has that quality about it that I love in a lot of festivals, where the artists are just kind of walking around and mingling in the crowd. And there was just something drawing me to this band. And then their sound check was murderously long. And I thought, all right, it's late. I've made it this long. If they're going to put that much effort into getting it right, I'm going to give these guys at least a few songs. And buddy, am I glad I did. Banjo and mandolin, guitar, drums, bass, Cincinnati, Ohio bass band, really all my kind of shit. They closed the night with a cover of Radiohead's Fake Plastic Trees. That one I caught on the way back to the car because my body was just about done, but they made a new fan of me for sure. I've never been to a festival quite like Laurel Cove, and I cannot wait for day 2. Follow the Marinade on all the socials, y'all, so you don't miss more coverage. Every time I attend a festival like this, I want to walk up to every single person with a shirt from one of our guests and personally ask them to follow the show. I'm watching a couple walk away right now as I'm recording this, and the gentleman is wearing a Drayton Farley shirt, and I just want to run up to him right now and be like, you should listen to the Marinade, sir. I think you'd really dig it. I got several compliments on my Matt Woods shirt. I saw a BJ Barham shirt, several Charles Wesley Godwin hats and shirts. Drayton's gear is all over the place. Y'all, if you're new to the show, welcome. I think you're going to like it here. And I just have a couple of asks of you. The biggest thing is just listen and tell people about the show. Subscribe on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. If you really dig it, you like what we're doing, and you can swing it, consider joining our Patreon community. For just $2 a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content. Stuff like our show, What We're Getting Down On, where my dear friend Peter Harrelson and I get together once a month and talk about the art that has us inspired at the moment. But everybody, above all, this kind of thing doesn't happen. I'm not sitting next to a creek at a coffee shop in the Cumberland Gap reporting from a festival, if not for every single one of you who listens. So thank you for listening, and until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.